everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Laurie and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about dementia change. We will.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Laurie LeBay, and I'm thrilled you can join us today. We're going to have a very interesting conversation about what is good care in memory care. And this is part of a 4-part series. This is number 3. But before I introduce you to our guests, I always like to give a couple of shout outs. So first of all, I want to shout out to all our new listeners. If you're not familiar with us, Alzheimer's Speaks is about sound information, not just sound bites. We like to have real conversations like with people like you all around the world at all levels. So please feel free to reach out to me at radio@alzheimersspeaks.com. I'd also like to mention that alzheimersspeaks.com has updated our website. So visit there. It's much easier to maneuver. In fact, we have one whole section that just has free educational resources, things you can listen to, things you can watch, things you can download, ideas on memory cafes, dementia-friendly communities, and so much more. Betty the Bald Chicken is now available to purchase. It's been a keynote of mine for years, and people have asked me to put it in book form. It is now available. It is not necessarily dementia specific, but it came to me when I was in the thick of things with dementia, so it definitely applies. But it's all about lessons in how to care. So if someone is struggling, maybe a child in school with bullying, maybe someone's gone through a divorce or had a death in the family, and you're just feeling awkward and out of place, Betty the Bald Chicken will hit a home run for you. So I also want to mention a couple of events that are coming up. One is called Changing Roles in Caregiving, and that is going to take place on Friday, April 28th from 9:30 to 2:30, and you'll also receive lunch. It's totally free, and this is being sponsored by Silver Creek on Main in Maple Grove, Minnesota. It is an in-person session. We're going to do 2 programs. One is on living graciously alongside dementia, getting tips and tricks. And the other is your words and thoughts impact how you care. Feel free to sign up for that. You can call Heidi at 763-955-1750. And then for others that are in this industry, I would really encourage you to check out Maud's Awards. There you can win anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 for work you've already done. So this isn't about pitching something you want to do, but it's for work that you've already done that you think would make a difference. And then last, I want to mention Dementia Map, our global resource directory. There you'll find 150 different categories. You can search for resources. There's a blog, a glossary of terms, and there's also an events calendar. So check that out. That is free to use. And maybe some of you listening want to be listed on there. We have both free and paid plans that you can have, but it is absolutely free to the end user. We're going to hear from the Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner, and then we'll be right back.
I love the footbar walker, and let me tell you why. It is the option for my toolbox that I've been waiting for. Let's be honest, there are some clients who, despite our best rehab efforts, just aren't able to return to performing a sit-to-stand transfer on their own. Now I can offer my caregivers an easier, safer option that doesn't involve hoisting their loved one up from a sitting position. I don't recommend this walker for all of my clients, but I do recommend this walker for those caregivers looking for an easier, safer option with transfers. I would also encourage other therapists to add this walker to their toolbox. It's kind of like having my own mobile parallel bars for the client to pull up on. Whether it's a family caregiver at home helping a loved one with Parkinson's or dementia, CNAs in a long-term care facility assisting their patients, or therapists adapting to client and caregiver specific needs, we now have a very safe and effective option to offer in the Footbar Walker. Check this product out at thefootbarwalker.com. That's it for today from Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner. Have a great day, and don't forget, if you can't do it, adapt it.
Okay, so we are back, and again, we are going to be talking about quality of life in memory care. What does good care look like? And this is part 3 of this series. So today I am so thrilled. We are going to have with us James Lee, who is with Bella Groves. We also have Deanna Vigliotta with Seni. And we are going to, again, be discussing what does good care look like in memory care. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with James, James Lee is the CEO and co-founder of Bella Groves, and it's a company in San Antonio, Texas, that's helping families in their journey of supporting a loved one living with dementia. And James has 15 years of experience in the senior living industry and is really focused on helping his local community in Central Texas. And then we have Deanna Vigliotta, who has over 30 years in healthcare and in sales management background. And she has just done such a great job. It's been a pleasure working with her and her team with Seni. She is the national sales manager for Seni, and she and her team are really relationship based. They are totally approaching incontinence care on a whole different level that I know I haven't seen, and I think many others haven't as well. It's really about informing and educating people on what is a high performing adult incontinence product. And this is, their area of expertise, and they're doing an absolute fabulous job with this, reaching out to home care and memory care, assisted living, pretty much anyone who will listen. And they are really making a big headway in bringing dignity back to those living with incontinence. And so I know I'm going to love this conversation this afternoon because these individuals love their jobs. They love what they're doing, and they are very mission-based on really bringing comfort to society so everyone can live a better life. Well, I am so excited to have the two of you on the show today. I know this is going to be a fun conversation because I see you both as futurists and just envisioning the world a much better place, and your hearts and souls are really behind your work and your mission. So before we get into, kind of the deep dive of the conversation of what is good care look like, I always like to ask everybody if they've been touched by dementia in their own family or circle of friends. And James, I'm going to throw that to you first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you, Laurie. And thanks for having me on here with Deanna. I have been touched by dementia. My grandmother had Alzheimer's disease as far as we knew. And I say that because we're not positive. I'm not sure that my family got an official diagnosis. But she passed away when I was early 20s. This was before I even got into senior living. And I only know it retroactively looking back on that time of our lives that, she was living with dementia. We just didn't officially have the terminology as a family. But today we're still touched by it. My wife's grandmother currently has Alzheimer's disease. And so, yeah, from a family perspective, and then from my immediate family and friends perspective, there's so many. And so I'd be surprised to find people who aren't touched by it in some way these days.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of times people think they aren't, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, yeah, there is, it's because it doesn't bubble to the top usually, right, unless you're just right smack in the middle of it. Deanna, for our audience, I know if they've been watching the series, they probably heard your answer, but if you'd share it for those that are new, that would be great.
Yeah. So I think I may have even shared recently, the older that I get, I'm starting to notice more and more of my friends' parents being diagnosed with early onset. I did have an aunt that passed away from Alzheimer's many years ago. So definitely touched. But, James just actually triggered a thought in hindsight. I'm going to date myself, but way back when we were called nurses' aides, not CNAs, nurses' aides, and you learn from shadowing. In hindsight, recognizing some of the people that I cared for probably had Parkinson's. I can in my mind, I can envision a couple of people with their shaking and so forth, and just different things. So you kind of go back in time as well. But yeah, touched different channels for sure.
Yeah, well, and it is interesting how the terminology has changed, how the conversation has opened up. I remember my great aunt being in a nursing home, and I was like 13, and they just called her senile. That's what happens. And I'll never forget when she didn't remember my name, and that touched the core of me. And I was so sad. I thought, what did I do wrong? Why is she remembering my brother? My brother could care less about her. He never comes and sees her, and he just happened to be there that day. My mom dragged him along, and I was so crushed, by that. But there was nothing to give me as a child. And, and then my mom, living with dementia for 30 years. So it's been quite the process for sure. And so many are going through this or questioning, am I going through this? Is this the beginning stage? So I think it's important to have these kinds of conversations with people, just to open it up. James, I want to go to you. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about Bella Groves, explain how it's a different business model than, what people are typically going to find out there when they're looking for memory care or memory resources.
Thanks, Laurie. Bella Groves is a education company around dementia, and we happen to have a care facility where we are presenting that information kind of as a first phase. But a simpler way of saying what Bella Groves is as a company is to tell you what we're trying to solve. The industry I come from, senior living, typically solves the problem, where does an older person live in their later years when they need help or socialization, etc. For families going through the caregiving journey through dementia, senior living only solves a small percentage of that timeline. The last 10 to 15% of somebody's journey with dementia may be in an assisted living or memory care facility. But the first 80, 90% in some cases of that caregiving journey is on their own. And I realized when I was an executive director of an assisted living community, I was meeting with several families in a row, and it dawned on me, I finally figured out what all of these families have in common. And that one thing was how much better off they would have been if they knew a little bit more earlier in that process. And so Bella Grows simply is trying to help people navigate from the beginning of that caregiving responsibility all the way through the end. And we provide that in three kind of distinct categories. The first level is a dementia education platform. So it's an online learning platform where we provide training and tips and content around here's how you can think about dementia, be a better caregiver, and better prepare for what journey lies ahead. That's the first stage. The second is what we call a dementia navigator service, where we help families to coordinate and take all the guesswork out of caring for their loved one. So Laurie, I'm sure in your 30 years helping your mom, there were lots of it you were just figuring out on your own without
pulling out the hair
without any resources. And all of that journey led you to Alzheimer's Speaks and Dementia Map and all the things that you've done. So that's our version of that here locally for families in San Antonio. And then the final stage of support is our dementia care facility, Bella Groves in Bulverde. So in a nutshell, to summarize all that up, we want to help families to navigate the entire journey of caregiving for their loved one living with dementia.
Well, it's an interesting concept because, I see most care facilities or communities, whatever you want to call them, do that totally in reverse. We're going to take the person, and then, maybe we'll help you navigate, and we'll throw in a little education to boot, to support. And I really do think, especially nowadays, especially after COVID, more and more families want to stay home. And that's always been a promise that's been made. And the guilt that families feel when they do make that move is significant. So having that education and, that time to understand and absorb what the disease entails, and really looking at how it affects you as an individual as well, and that self-care and what are the best decisions for all of us wrapped in that are really important. So kudos.
Yeah, thank you. Something you just said there, Laurie, that I hear all the time about families who are feeling guilty about, I made a promise to my mom, or I made a promise to my husband or my wife that I would never put them in a nursing home. Those words I hear over and over and over again. But, it just dawned on me when you said that, would you ever make a promise, or make your kids promise you, hey, kids, if I ever have cancer, promise me you'll never take me to the hospital? You wouldn't think to say that, because you have an understanding of what cancer is. You can't go through that ailment alone. So you would never ask somebody to make that promise. And I think the falsehood around dementia today is people think it's something that you can just kind of power through or muscle through, or it's just part of aging, and we just have to love each other strongly enough that we can do this at home. But making that promise of never putting you in a nursing home doesn't account for the fact that dementia is not a normal part of aging. And it is as much of a disease process, like Alzheimer's disease is as much of a challenging process as cancer. So why would you make somebody promise you, I'm never going to get help for you if you get this disease?
Yeah, except we don't have a cure.
Except
with a lot of cancers.
Right.
I mean, there's a good treatment plan, and extended life where people can come back. That's an excellent point. One of the things I wanted to ask you too was, in talking with families a lot, you must kind of have a list together of what are kind of the hot topics that people really want to know about.
Absolutely. So most of the interactions I have with families are still geared towards that residential care facility setting. So I'll kind of focus on that. And when people come into that, mostly because they don't know what else to ask for, they say things like, I want to make sure my mom is, well cared for and is safe. And, they tend to focus just around those needs. What they don't realize that they can ask for is, I want my mom to feel happiness and joy. I want my family and I to feel peace of mind. I want all of us in this process to feel connection, reconciliation. These are the things they should be asking for, because that's actually what we provide, I think, is a platform for that. But families oftentimes, because they don't know enough about this process, or what to expect from care facilities, they ask for the bare minimum, which is care and safety.
And that looks different to everyone. But so does, and I think part of it is we don't give permission to talk about feelings openly in this country. I mean, we're much more open than some countries, but in a lot of ways it isn't discussed. And that is important. And people don't understand that, if I want your mom or dad or husband or wife to be happy, then I need to do things in a certain way to make them peaceful. And then when they're peaceful, it builds trust for the family, and it allows them to be peaceful. So it takes this whole agitation, piece out, and it just gives a much clearer understanding. So I think that would be a great way for all communities to approach when they're asking families, how do you want them to feel when they're here? I mean, approach the question from that stance and then answer, because really it is about that emotional peace of mind and peace of heart. It's going to make it a good match or not. And by those answers from that person, you're going to know if it's a good match, if they really understand how how to make your person happy. And they're in that doing, they're also going to educate the family of, this is the way we approach it and why, because it does bring peace, it does bring comfort, it does bring laughter, which so often are left out, especially if families have gotten kind of to their wits' end where they've lost that. They are just tackling those tasks and everyone's at their wits' end.
I think that's a really good point, Laurie. If I were to ask somebody whose parent wasn't living with dementia, and I asked them, what are your goals for your parent? Their responses should be the same as our families. They should be saying the same things. And the fact that dementia takes over every aspect of a person's life right now, as without the education and resources that people should have, their only context is bare minimum care, safety, food, showers, etc. But they should be answering the same as somebody who didn't have dementia. I want my mom to feel fulfilled. I want her to feel, joyful and connected. And those are all things that are still possible. You just need the right care team around you who has that same goal in mind.
Well, it's interesting. And I think it was you that I was talking to the other day that said, if I went to go place my child in childcare, I would be asking different questions. My expectations would be much grander than what they are when I place an elder in a community.
Right.
Was that you that?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about how, when we look at childcare, the administrators and teachers of that childcare facility, their clients are the family members. They're the parents. They're assisting the parents in their goals of parenthood. And so, in senior living, we often talk about the senior person as our client, but they are really the person for whom we are acting on behalf of them. So families are really our partners in that journey. And so I think when we frame everything around that context, we understand that we're not displacing family, we're supporting family as a team.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And I've always felt that way. And I've seen it work and I've seen it not work very well as well. And it's really difficult when it doesn't work, when you don't feel part of the team or included, or we don't do that. You go over there, where do I go over there? Tell me where that is. I mean, that was personally part of some of my frustration because there was nowhere that I knew to go. And so for you to have this hyper focus locally, where you're at, I think is really truly amazing and something I would love to see expand. Deanna, I want to pull you into the conversation. You've been shaking your head down there, but my guess is you've got a couple of thoughts on what we've talked about so far. What are your thoughts regarding James' philosophy?
Yeah. It's funny, as he was saying a couple of things, because I think when we first started talking, we talked about how everybody plays a part in the care and the happiness and the journey. And it's interesting when he brings up, and you were just talking about the daycare issue, because I'm so in the trenches every single day, eat, sleep, and breathe incontinence. I tie, as he's saying that, I'm saying it's, we have this analogy all day long about someone who has if you had a child and they had a diaper rash, right? You would never say to your spouse going out the door for your little one, get the cheapest product out there, and I'll be with you in 2 months. We'll fix it then. We'll look at it, type of thing. So these types of things come to my mind immediately of how we approach things as everybody contributes to the care of people on their journey. The other thing that came to mind immediately, I was when we talk about engagement and happiness and connectivity, I think I may have shared this story with you, Laurie, but it still sticks with me every day. I was in a community, it was a memory care community, I lose track of time, it might have been 6 months ago, and I was with one of my teammates, and we were doing a product training, and it was a memory care, and it was early in the morning. And the nice executive director let us in, and she said, hang tight. Some of the aides are going to come by and we'll do the training right here. and there was a woman coming down the hall walking, and she was a resident. As she got closer, we could tell she was holding a blanket and so forth, and you could tell she was a resident. But we had brought in donuts, and she came over to us, and she was trying to talk with us. We couldn't really make out what she was saying, but it gets a little bit uncomfortable when you're an outsider coming in of, I know she wants a donut. It's not our place to give her. We don't know different things. So we held tight and talked with her as best that we could. And a caregiver came around the corner, and we said, we know she wants a donut. And the caregiver took her hand and she opened the box, and it was a glazed donut. And I'll never forget, they had a nice little area, and she held the hand of that resident, and they sat down, and she split the donut in half. She had a half, the resident had a half. And it was for me, it was one of these most touching moments, because we read a lot, anybody in this industry, all types of what engagement looks like, what safety looks like, what care looks like. We have a million different ways to define it. But it made me think, when I left that meeting, that resident was smiling, that caregiver was smiling. It was the simplest form of engagement that was so touching on so many different levels. And I remember driving off thinking to myself, if that was my mom or dad with neurocognitive decline, I don't know the answer, but would that be I would want to hear about it. So do we share that little piece that could be a little piece to someone, but it would be a big piece to others? Like, that would be questions that I'd be thinking about. And then is that enough for me as an adult child? Would that make my whole day, or are there continuous little pieces that make up? So it's complex, I guess. My mind goes right to complexities from so many different angles. But as you're back and forth sharing, those were a couple of immediate thoughts that came to mind.
Well, I love that story. And I think, as a family member, and this is one of the things I go out and even teach, is, we have to have families trust us. And what's one of the best ways to do it? It's by sharing moments of joy. Not, hello, we screwed up the meds, somebody fell, their purse is missing. I mean, those are the calls we usually get. And it's like the phone rings, and it's like the bat phone, and your heart starts just palpitating, going, oh my gosh, what's wrong now? I mean, that's what most families will say. But we can switch that whole scenario if we start sharing moments of joy, and don't do it on a planned time, but do it authentically when it happens, and even take and I know a lot of communities, got to the point where they didn't want staff having phones because they were being misused, but to be able to do a little Facebook, or take a picture of the two of them and send it through an email, or do a Facebook time and go, hey, we're just sitting here sharing a donut. Those are things that make a family's heart melt. And I can speak from experience on that, because it calmed my whole day down. And because you're always thinking about your person, even if it's not consciously, it's in the back of your mind. And it's just like, they get my person, they love my person. Or, that moment of, when my mom was in community, she didn't realize people were staff. They were her friends, so that
Right.
simple moment, sitting there sharing a donut, was a moment with a friend. It's just viewed differently from both sides. And I think that's when those true magic moments really, really happen. James, do you have any comments on Deanna's story?
I think those are the stories that our colleagues or professionals in this field really should be talking about. They're the things that we should be telling families about. Our industry of senior living, when I say our industry, I mean the one that I look through my lens. Senior living often talks about needing to tell a quote unquote better and different story. And what they typically mean by that is, we need to sell our building better than they sell their building. And it is such a wrong approach. It creates distance between us and the people that we're meaning to serve. But if the content marketing and the social media and the just traditional marketing, even if those things if we just took a small fraction of the stories, the heartwarming stories that we actually see every single day, and we were able to show families, here's what's ahead for you, not just, care responsibilities and dementia symptoms, not that. That's going to be there regardless. But as we join this partnership together, here's what joy looks like. Here's what organic, social connections looks like. So I love Deanna's story because those are the stories that we live for every day. And I think the difference with Bella Groves is that we're not just incidentally hoping we see stories like that. I think, Laurie, you and I talked about the difference between joy and happiness. Happiness can exist kind of at a, just in a general state. I can be happy, but joy is intentional and it is brief. You have to create those moments of joy or be prepared for the conditions of joy. And I think that is our responsibility as professionals in this field, is to move away just from clinical terminology and doom and gloom and more towards, here's the good stuff ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For myself, I developed a tool called Your Memory Chip because I always had my little to-do list, which I think most families do. And I think with many companies, people have gotten so micromanaged, I guess is the best word.
Sure.
And so everyone's focused on tasks, just like where you were saying, is we want to sell more than them. We want to have more beds filled than them. And that is really backwards. And so for me, I ended up creating this tool that focuses on, is my mom safe? Is she happy? Is she pain-free? And when I focus on those basic needs, just take it all down to the bottom of Maslow's theory, then I did my task differently. And it also got the job done for her, but it gave me great comfort and contentment in doing that. And that was just a huge, huge gift, I think, to both of us. But again, it's focusing on being relationship based. And I know people still use the term person-centered care. And when I hear that, I just think of quality control and surveys, that's the term they use. But most families don't even know what that really means. They just, think it means, well, you're taking care of my person. But when you say relationship based, to me, they know what a relationship is, and I think there's a better understanding of what that care can look like. But that's just my personal thought there.
Yeah. Terms like person-centered care, the thing about great phrases like that is that they're wonderful in the beginning until everybody starts using it, and then it dilutes the meaning of it. And so person-centered care, when I first heard about it, as I was kind of growing through this industry, I thought, oh, what a beautiful way to describe, providing care for someone based on their personhood, the individual at the center of that care need. And then the more that everybody started using that phrase, the less it was what it was intended to be. And so now everybody's looking for the new phrase that's going to orient people around this concept. But I think instead of continuously trying to find new ways to freshen up, words and phrases, we all just need to get to the basic of what was intended by person-centered care, and are there organizations out there actually doing it? And the ones who are need to tell their story of how they're doing it.
Yep. Well, and I think the only way you can do that is to really be inclusive of your staff. And a lot of times the direct care staff who are, developing these stories, creating these stories, aren't heard from. It's
That's
upper
right.
management. And I think that is a huge misstep, because families see that, wow, the activities person or life enrichment person, they are key to that whole joy piece. And yet they're not heard from, and you see as a family member, a lot of times, I hate to say it, and this is in all communities, but they're not always well respected, of what they're delivering.
I agree.
And I think that they're just kind of a turnkey piece because they're the ones that are most engaged with the people. They really know who they are, what they like, what their habits are, much more so than a lot of the management team, because the management team is reviewing reports and they're clicking off medical needs or whatever it might be. And please correct me if I'm wrong on that, but as a individual who, has been through this process with many, not just my family members, those are things I hear over and over again.
Yeah, I think our industry does a really good job at taking people's passions and over complicating how they deliver, their gift to others. I think about if you loved driving cars, like that was your thing. I love driving cars. And then you take that person, you put them inside of this vehicle, and then in the back seat, you've got people yelling directions at them all day. Turn left, slow down, turn right, go faster. You would take all of the joy out of driving because you're in the back seat yelling directions the whole time. And I think that activities directors, nurses, even executive directors, so many people join this profession because they quote unquote love driving. They want to make those decisions. They want to feel the joy of doing the thing that they love. And our industry is just full of backseat drivers. And that's part of why Bella grows. We've set out from the very start, we're not going to be a big company, and we're only going to focus on our neighbors here in San Antonio, eventually Central Texas. But yeah, this mission could serve a lot more people than that. But I think when we keep our focus small and here, I think that's how we move forward as an industry, is that we actually think smaller, not bigger. Smaller meaning local.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Do you have any stories that you want to share from Bella Groves on how bringing joy to your residents really, has aligned, with both the resident, the family, and the staff as well? I mean, that's a full circle loop, when you're creating joy.
It really is. There's so much we could, share here. The one that kind of comes to mind, because we're kind of in 2.0 version of the story right now, is that there's one of our first residents, actually the very first resident to move in with us. We were all sitting around one day talking about our pets, and he was talking about how many dogs he had had his whole life. And so I asked him, hey, I'm going to use a fake name. I'll say, hey, John, which one was your favorite dog? And he got quiet for a second and he said, my most recent one, my last dog, that was my favorite. And he started getting tearful, and as he was recalling that story. And we realized that at the end of that, we need to go get a community dog. We hadn't talked about it, and we thought, why not? Let's go for it. So John and I and a few of our team members, we all prepared for the community pet together. So mind you, this is somebody living with dementia, and there's this falsehood around dementia that you can't create new memories. But in fact, John remembered day to day. He said, hey, when we go find our dog, do you think we should get a crate now, or should we wait to see how big the dog is going to be? And then the next day he would write a supply list and he'd say, okay, we need to get this, this, and this. And so when you're infusing joy around an experience, you sure can really challenge some of the assumptions around dementia and capabilities around dementia. So he progressively got more and more excited about it. And on the day we went and he led the way. He kind of went from pen to pen and he's like, oh, let's play with this one. And there they found each other, John and this dog named Mabel. And we all realized, okay, this is the dog that we're going to adopt. And so we brought the dog home, and Mabel followed him around. I mean, she knew, this is my rescuer, this is my person, this is my human. And so she followed him around everywhere. And unfortunately, Mabel was an older dog, so she didn't live very long, less than a year. But for the time that she was there, this resident felt profound joy in not just the experience of bringing that dog home, but the other part of the story that I love is that when it came time to put Mabel down and end her suffering when things got tough for her, we brought the resident with us. So we didn't spare John the heartache or the grieving process. In fact, he was very much alive because he was in that moment, and he got to go and he got to say goodbye to Mabel. He was comforting me. He was patting my back, saying, "Oh, I hope you're going to be okay." And so it was a full, circle of life kind of story here in less than a year. But I think those are the stories that come out of our community, because we understand that it's not about, like bubble wrapping somebody and protecting them from all of the human emotions. In that instance, we honored him, and think about how difficult it would have been for us to just cart the dog off and come back without Mabel. How much of a disservice that would have been to the resident. But he was very much a part of that entire experience, and I love that we get to do stuff like that.
Well, that's a beautiful story. And I think, by creating that joy, what people don't understand is you're creating that engagement. You're allowing them to feel heard and part of the family and purposeful. And by allowing him to go, like you said, full circle, he had closure. He wouldn't have had closure otherwise. He got to be part of that. That's huge. And I think that's a great visual when you talk about bubble wrapping them, and people with dementia talk all the time about the risk of living. It's there.
Absolutely.
It's there. Don't take all my risk away, because then I'm not going to feel like it's worth being here.
It's true. It's one of the indignities around dementia that there's a lot of people who intend to do good in providing support for somebody with dementia, but because we as a profession don't ask those people directly how they want to live and what they need from us, we bubble wrap them. There were so many communities where I couldn't even put a normal knife on the dinner table because of some irrational fear that people living with dementia are going to hurt other people with it. But if you're serving somebody chicken or steak, give them the utensils to cut it for themselves, right? So I think giving people back risk in a lot of ways is part of the work that we all need to be striving toward.
Yeah, and giving them dignity. I mean, otherwise they know when they're being dealt with like a child.
Of course,
and they hate that, and they talk about that.
Yeah.
They let us know, even if they can't use words, there's other ways it's going to come out, and then we're going to be wondering, well, why are they acting like that? Well, how would you feel? So I'm wondering if you can give us maybe 4 key things of and just briefly, just kind of summarizing of what good care looks like to you in a memory care.
I don't know if I'm going to get to 4, because honestly, I think it can be whittled down to even less than that.
Okay.
One thing is that everything that we do is a reverse engineered process from good outcomes. So it almost sounds too easy to give this answer, but what a good memory care looks like is that you are working towards specific and intended outcomes, and then you work backwards from there. So one quick example of that is we have 0 residents at Bella Groves who have lost weight since moving in, which is an amazing thing in a dementia care setting. So all of our residents have either maintained or gained weight, which is the outcome that we want. So if you work your way backwards from there, I, as a backseat driver or recovering backseat driver in our industry, I thought, oh, you have to have XYZ, this menu, et cetera. But what ended up happening and having the right outcome was that we have one meal. We have one choice. It's a family style meal. And so everybody eats the same thing. There's not complexities around choices and things like that. And I didn't know that was going to be the way we got to the outcome. But when you have the right outcome, people are eating, they're engaged, they're, maintaining their weight. If it works, it works. And so for me, one good component of good care is let's step out of our own kind of intellectual ego, and let's just start with the outcome that we want and work our way backwards from there. So that's number one. Number two is shared approach, shared methodology. So oftentimes family members have no idea what approach you're taking as a care provider. They get a once a month or once a quarter report about here's the care plan, but they're not oftentimes given the skills and the context to provide care in a consistent way as we do in Bella Groves. So we provide education. When we have family nights, we actually go through lessons and teach new skills. So everybody has a commitment towards we are doing this together and in a similar fashion. So I think that's number two. And then I will give a number three here. Most dementia care communities are filled with people who want to do a good job, but they are not given the framework or organizational structure to get that done. Mm-hmm. And so for me, as a former caregiver, that was my first job in this industry. I was a caregiver 15 years ago. I knew what it was like to work short. I knew what it was like to work overnights and never see a manager. And the list goes on about what we as an industry confine our caregivers with these limitations. So when we think like a caregiver and give them the means and the resources to do their job well, part of that means proper staffing ratios. We have a 1-to-4 staffing ratio at our community that I can't even find one close to that in our market or anywhere probably. And so when you provide the right staffing ratio, then the caregivers go from task masters to actually being there for residents. So they have downtime. And most caregivers, if they were listening to this, they'd be like, what's downtime?
Yep.
But we have planned downtime. They do activities. They go for walks with residents. They can just stop what they're doing. And they've got cushion of time to just be in the moment with somebody, even if that moment is just listening to a story. So we're sharing a donut, right, Deanna? So when you give caregivers the tools and the organizational structure to do what they want to do, there's some amazing things that happen. So I'd say those three would probably be my criteria for what makes a good care community.
I love that because it's very different from what you hear, from most out there in pretty much all different types of care regarding healthcare. It's not outcome oriented. And, working that reverse plan only makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
And I see so many various businesses doing the same thing they've always done and then wondering why it's not working or not even noticing that it's not working. It's just, we've checked the list off, so it's done. But is it done with any kind of quality? Is it done with any type of dignity? And I would imagine too, your approach reduces staff turnover because you're
Mm-hmm.
giving them not only the responsibility, but you're giving them the creativity to be themselves and to kind of work within a situation. And I think one of the worst things that I see nowadays, and it's just pretty much in anybody I know who has a job, is they're not given the responsibility and the creativity to be dealt with like they're an adult making proper decisions. And that rips apart your team.
Yeah. I would be shocked if you found any professional caregiver anywhere in the world who would say, I got into senior care because I want to get lots of tasks done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I hope I can work somewhere where I can do 30 tasks in a row and knock them all off before I go home. Nobody's saying that. Everybody, whether they articulate it in the interview or not, the only real reason that anybody wants to work in this industry is because they feel like they're going to make a difference in somebody's life. That's
Mm-hmm.
it, right? And we as an industry have overcomplicated that. And if we stopped seeing caregivers as labor and we saw them more as natural resources, right? They are the human capital, they're the natural resources. And all we have to do is try to figure out a way that these natural resources can get to the people that want them. We as a business are just a platform for getting the coffee beans into the coffee mug, right? So caregivers want to give care. And so we have to remove complexity and help them do that. And one of the ways we do that is our extensive dementia training. Mm-hmm. So our caregivers report at the end of their 13 weeks of training, wow, I've been doing this for a long time before Bella Grows, but this training helped me unlock just new skills that I didn't realize I needed. And now I'm much more successful with managing behavioral, symptoms. I'm much more successful with successful showers and the care tasks that help somebody feel dignified. It didn't occur to me until we were executing this through Bella Groves. Caregivers want to be more successful in giving care. And that's all we have to be as Bella Groves, is just try to make that happen.
Yeah. They've lost, I think, and again, I think this goes across the board for most industries. They've lost the whole point of mentoring people to be their best.
Right.
And I see this all the time, and I hear this all the time too, about why are they keeping this person? They're destroying the team. You get that one toxic person, but they stay because nobody wants to get sued. They're more worried about getting sued than they are, and it just destroys so many teams out there. And then they lose their good people. One of the things I wanted to ask you too, James, was what are some of the things that you see communities doing well in the industry? I probably focus more on some of the negative than the rest of you. But what are some of the things that you're seeing that are good that they're doing out there?
Yeah. One of the things that I think our industry is getting much better at is storytelling. We talked about that earlier in the show. The effect of good storytelling is that it shows other people in this industry what good looks like. And so even though this may feel peripheral or kind of on the edge, but when we share videos, when we share stories, all of the things that I know that the forefront intention is maybe sales and marketing, but the byproduct of all of that effort is that we're sharing good stories with one another. And I think that's incredible. I benefit from that when I see stories come out of other communities. So I think that's really good. The other thing that I think our industry is doing well, but almost begrudgingly, Laurie, is that I think we are starting to understand that this population of people who work in this industry want and demand flexibility. In addition to good working environments, they with the rise of kind of care agencies and organizations that allow for kind of this gig economy around senior care, we as an industry are a little bit slow to embrace this, but I think a lot of us are starting to embrace it more. That instead of just focused on 100% retention of full-time staff, you need to create a system where your business is very good at bringing in just anybody who wants to be there with you and giving them the simplified means to be effective in their job. So I think we're doing a better job of that. And then the other thing I think we are starting to do well is things like partnerships, like Deanna's on this show here with us. And in a lot of ways, the partnerships, I know from the vendor side of senior living, can feel very frustrating because there are not as many communities that are progressive or innovative or wanting to think about, oh, this makes sense to think about these partnerships. But I do think that there are smaller organizations like Bella Groves that are going to push these type of partnerships and innovations. And so I'm excited to see that. And the big guys better pay attention, because the small players on the field are going to be the ones to really advance these changes. And I'm all for it. And I would encourage anybody who feels like their small business size is a hindrance to really think of it as an advantage. And you can really try and experiment with things that others are not willing to. And that's where we're going to make a big difference.
Well, and I think when you do that, it's kind of like in some ways a grassroots effort.
Totally.
Because you're outside the bureaucracy. You can make those maneuvers and you can try something. If it doesn't work, you can maneuver back another, you can play that game a little bit more, where I think sometimes with larger companies, and again, this isn't an overall, but with the majority, it's more black and white. There's got to be these control lines set up, or they feel that there has to be these control lines, instead of saying, within this community, kind of like within a city, you manage your city, you meet the needs of your community, because what's in Minnesota and what's over in another state or another county could be a whole different population,
right?
Needs that are being met. And speaking of collaboration, I wanted to and Deanna, I'm going to throw this to you. How did you two meet, you and James meet, to begin with? I always find that really interesting to know.
Yeah. Well, I think the first time we met, true story, and I looked actually to see, when was this meeting, and I was kind of shocked that it was sooner than I had thought. I would have years ago. But he had actually posted. I had been following LinkedIn, trying to learn the industry from all channels, and I liked his posts. So anyway, but he had put a post up that he was attending a conference in Orlando, and I live in the Orlando area, and he said, I'd love to connect with people in Orlando. So I thought, okay, I'm going to toss my name out. Really well. And so I did, and shot him an email and said, do you want to connect in the lobby of this hotel on one of the conference days? And he did. And so right out of the gate, I thought, that's different. I've got a CEO of a community that puts something out there. Will you meet? Anybody in the area that wants to meet, will you meet? Okay, I'm going to put that. And we met. And I tell you, he asked me right out of the gate, what do you know about Bella Groves? And I knew about his subscription model, which was really education model, I should say, which was really appealing to me because it was different. And so we had an early, conversation, just very casual. In getting to know someone, I'm all about relationships and partnerships and all that good stuff, but I'm really about baby steps. I'd rather go get to really know someone and go deeper versus wide type of thing. It was just kind of a nice conversation about what we're doing at Seni, what he was doing at Bella Groves. And one of the things that I learned about him was that I had read before that he likes to cook. And I automatically, I always try to look for common ground and bring value somehow, because I just believe in senior care, in healthcare, we all should be resources and every day be thinking, how can I help? How can I help? It doesn't have to be a direct correlation of what we do and a give to a get. It's got to be valuable. So anyway, he kind of took my mind back to going way back in time again at it was called a retirement home at the time, my first job. And we made this awesome Pepperidge Farm toast that I tell you, my friends, he brought up earlier, and Laurie, you brought it up too, that I think staffing ratios, back in the day before corporately, from a business sector, healthcare, everything got so lean and so tight. And you have a role, and that's the role that you do. But way back in the day, people really did talk around the bubbler. We called it up north. I think it's a water cooler, in the southern part of the States. But what you did talk, and you came to work not only to have your role of what you did. If it was caring for people, it was providing care. But I tell you, I went to work quite often as a younger person, because if James was working, James is on the shift. Good. I know we have fun. Laurie's on the shift. I know we have fun. That to me seems like, unfortunately, that has gone by the wayside when we gotten more lean as a country. And I say this on the corporate side, on the healthcare, and now I'm seeing it in senior living. And I think people, as much as the residents, we want this feel good and joy and happiness, and that's the primary focus, absolutely. But we've got to feel good about what we do as a whole, right? And we've got to feel good about the care that we're getting. And so I think when there's collaboration internally and then there's collaboration externally, it's all connected for better outcomes and improve quality of life for everybody, understanding that in senior living, the residents of first. So I met him at a conference, and then he actually, I think we just went back and forth a little bit here and there. And then he intrigued me again. An email went out or a post on LinkedIn that said, hey, who's interested in doing this think tank event? And it piqued my interest for two reasons. Number one, you would leave there with a deliverable, whether it's a podcast, an ebook, or something. I like that. I go to a lot of conferences, and there are great conferences out there. And then there are conferences where, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? With everything. But what I liked is that conference right out of the gate said, here's a deliverable. And I also had a teammate that was starting in Texas. And I thought, oh, what better way to spend some time with my teammate, to get right in the trenches with other senior living professionals. And what was so special about that conference, it was both vendor, providers, partners, solution, whatever we want to call the names. And then it was community providers as well, in addition to James having some of his teammates there. So it was, I never felt like there was a line in the sand. And that's what was so wonderful about it. It was people working together, not saying that, oh, we need all this help in this industry, it's terrible. It wasn't that. It was, here's where we're at. What can we do better? Because we can always do better. So what can we look at and escalate even more? And so we broke into groups and we spent 2 days. And I've got some great additional relationships that have come out of that, where we may never do business together. And that's secondary. That relationship with a couple of other folks it's deep, it's tight, it's resourceful. It makes myself a better resource in the industry, which hopefully helps my teammates. They're always helping. It just goes round robin. So long story short, some conferences, we would just cross paths at the recent Texas Assisted Living Association, which I'll sing their praises as well, because I am seeing with conferences a little bit, the line in the sand between vendor and community is going away a little bit. And I think that has to happen, where people have to walk in the other shoes, that not everybody who's offering something to a community is out there for the quick sale or buy from me. We care as much as the providers care and the caregivers care, like anyone else. So so we're I think we've built a nice relationship along the way.
Well, you brought up a really interesting point, because you said not everyone's out there to sell. And I think I definitely think that's true. But I also think the industry put up walls to stop those relationships. And so then in order to touch base, it got down to the power sell, because you knew you were never going to be able to have that relationship anymore with people. People used to drop in, and all of a sudden, hospitals and clinics and stuff are saying, no, you can't come. You can't come. And it's like, well, you still need my product. So how am I going to do that? And you see that in a lot of different variables. And yet those relationships kind of gets back to James in terms of giving people time to breathe. It gave people time to breathe and maybe have a laugh, have a cup of coffee, and they're missing that they're regenerating to going back to doing their work and stuff. And so I think a lot of that has happened too in the industry. And again, it's about being able to trust people. And granted, you're always going to have those ones that cross the line, with that stuff, but then deal with those people, don't penalize the whole lot with that. I know we need to get wrapping up here pretty quick. So, but I want to ask you, Deanna, about incontinence products, and are there some that are better for people living with cognitive decline than others?
Yeah, so I think we hear from people in memory care that people with dementia tend to fare better if they're wearing a pull-up that's more like their own underwear. I think comfortability comes into play. And what I mean by that is, not only just soft materials, that's a big part of it, but being in the right absorbency level. You could have someone who maybe has assistance with toileting during the day, and they may need something for moderate incontinence, right? And maybe a heavier product, an overnight product at night. So during the day, they might need something that's a little bit less bulky than what they would at night. So it really is important when it comes to incontinence products for people to look at. Is it fully breathable? Is it super absorbent? Does it have inner leak guards? What's the size? What's the style? I know with high quality products like ours, 3 to 4 changes in a 24-hour period is that's needed. And we've heard from some communities that we work with, you could have a resident that might have some challenges with not wanting assistance with being changed. And so that becomes very stressful for the resident. And then in turn, it could be stressful for the caregiver, and you could have a family member as well. So again, this connectivity, it relates to everybody. So if we can cut down on the number of changes when you use a high quality product, you can do that, and that resident that user can still remain healthy, with full breathability from a skin breakdown or different things. So definitely there are different products where people will fare better with different styles and absorbencies and fits. The best thing we can do is always try to improve continence first, say from some level, and go with increasing the continence level first. And then for that demographic that they do need a product, I think the key is just, working with someone that understands incontinence and samples. Our company gives out samples. That's huge. We don't want people buying and then it doesn't fit right, or it's not the right absorbency, and they're buying again and trying, and then they're frustrated and it just doesn't work. So we try to make it as easy as we can to get people in the right fit and be able to live a more dignified and happy lifestyle.
Well, and I love that you guys are so educational based, because you bring up some great points. And again, it gets back to James's start with the outcome and work in reverse, and it's not something that you hear from most incontinence companies. They're trying to, it kind of reminds me of when I was in real estate, the builders always wanted big and flashy and, life is good. And so even on commercials, they're not talking the nitty gritty stuff. Like that makes so much sense to have one for day and one for evening, that they're going to meet a different purpose. And if families knew that, they would go that route, or if communities knew that. But instead, it's just like, I need a brief, and you're back to that task, plugging a hole and getting it done, instead of being really efficient or smart and allowing that person, to be comfortable and not agitated. We wonder where all these moods come from, and I think of, my daughter has a new baby, and boy, when Sailor, is wet, she lets get me out of here. I want a clean diaper on. And even earlier you had mentioned too about skin breakdowns, but there can be like rashes just because of the product itself is irritating to somebody's skin, and looking at all of those types of things. I wanted to ask, are you guys working together right now, or are you just in conversations with Seni and Bella Groves?
Yeah, I'll tackle that on. So Deanna, what you said earlier about relationships and building that for the long run, I think we're one of those examples where we haven't signed on the dotted line with one another in any official capacity, but ever since we met a little over a year ago, that's we've had so many conversations and relationship starters and connecting other people, like this conversation with you, Laurie, came from Deanna. And so I love that Deanna, she stands behind her philosophy and she just connects people together, whether they're working with them or not. Having said that, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that for us, it was just a matter of time of when we kind of bring that service on for our residents and our families. And part of what we're doing with that Dementia Navigator service to help people at home is to take organizations like Seni, who don't have a direct-to-consumer route, as far as I'm aware, but for us as an organization to act almost like a fulfillment center for those clients and to say, oh, you don't know where to get great incontinence products? Well, we'll do that for you and give that to you as part of your membership. If you don't know how to hire caregivers, how to put a ramp on your house, these are all things that we have the capacity to bring these relationships and have them work for you. So we're not official Seni product users yet, but we will be.
Mm-hmm. Well, and my guess is for you, James, relationship comes before product. You want to know that you're dealing with someone who's sound and who has something that really viably is going to work for you.
I'm gonna maybe have a cheat answer here, Laurie, because I think when you prioritize relationships, you actually get the best products out of that too. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to think of any example where I've had a superior product, but I've had to deal with a bad relationship. Mm-hmm. You know, if you, the people that tend to have good relationships with you tend to back the companies that have the best products and services. So I think those two are actually the same, but the only real way to get to a superior quality product is to have the relationship up front. Mm-hmm.
Deanna, any thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, I would agree. It's so crucial, especially with we're dealing with human beings. We're helping human beings at the end of the day. So I think you definitely, when you look at services, products, communities, relationships are key. For the most part, I almost look at it kind of sort of like with communities. It's a partnership. It's there'll be questions, there could be some hiccups, but it's how you navigate through as one. Ultimately, favorable outcome should come from that. So so I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah, we're excited about the future and to work with Bella Groves and to continue. I'm excited to continue to work with James. I know there's so many other channels to get down. It's exciting time. You know, we're big company, but kind of, sort of. We're new to the USA, so we've got a small team here, and it is a shift in that mindset from commodity to critical continuum of care. So we're kind of grassroots with things that we're doing too, and it's fun. It's fun when you make a difference and you hear, I know, people will say with my teammates and I, you guys are way too comfortable with it. We're like, you know what, we are, and we're proud of it. I don't have to change sheets. It's like, yes, you slept through the night. Woo! So it's good. It's good.
It is good. And I think one of the things that I like about both of you is when you're looking at products or services, you're really looking at collaborations. You're looking deeper. And it's not just a one-time off purchase, thanks, I needed this, but you are building relationships, and that is going to continue, and you are supporting one another and challenging one another, with ideas and concepts. And I think that's a really beautiful, beautiful thing that to me makes me want to go to work. Mm-hmm. That's what I love about my job too, is like, I don't have all the answers. I hope no one thinks that I think I do, because I know I don't. And even if something is working well, in my eyes, it can always be improved too. So, the best way to be able to do that is to have good, solid communication. And like you said, work through those hiccups if they are some. That's where some of the best brainstorming comes from, working together by those affected. Well, this has just been a wonderful, wonderful show. I do want to give information out so people know how to contact you. So for James, you can go to bellagroves.com, or you can call 512-810-8244. And for Seni, you can go to their website, Seni, SENI-USA.com. Or you can email Deanna, and we have that listed. But we've just made it real easy to click through. They're on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook as Seni Cares. And again, know that you can get some samples. They'll help you through this process as well. And if you're a business, reach out. They'd love to talk to you as far as incontinence products and how they can improve not only the quality of life for your residents or those you care for, but for your staff as well, and for those families. It's just a kind of a no-brainer to not have this conversation. So to both of you, I just want to thank you so much. I loved your insight. To our listeners, I want to ask that they be givers of hope. Share this show. There's so many people that need to hear this information in the industry, family members, people living with dementia who might be, earlier onset. Let them hear, what's going on and what good quality care looks like, and learn from, what are the questions that should be asked, and what should we be allowing families to say. We need to teach them it's okay to say, I want joy, I want comfort, for my person, and this is what it looks like for them. That's a way we deliver great care and work as a team. So again, like, click, and share. Be a giver of hope. And I can't wait for our next episode. We have one more to go. This is a 4-part series sponsored by Seni. So again, thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.
Hey everybody, Jared Sebesti here, host of Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the 2 most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. Few people can just flip the switch from working a career 30 or 40 plus years, retiring on Friday, without methodical steps to living what we call a repurposed retirement. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.